Well, hello folks, and welcome to another early edition of our weekly topical deep dive. Last week we took a look at Roku's Voice Remote Pro, and this week's video is coming to you a little ahead of schedule so we can share our thoughts on Roku's latest streaming player, the Roku Express 4K Plus. It's their new 4K capable player that's coming in at a budget-minded price tag of $39.99. But how does it compare to other options within Roku's lineup, and how does it fare against other similarly priced 4K devices currently on the market? Well, that's what we're here to find out. But first up, full disclosure, Roku did provide us with this particular Roku Express 4K Plus for free. However, all our opinions about the device remain 100% our own. So with all of that out of the way, let's dive right in, shall we? This is the Cord Cutters News Review of the Roku Express 4K Plus. What's so special about the Roku Express 4K Plus? So we've seen this particular form factor before in the earlier Roku Express line, but here it's packing some upgraded internals that add support for, surprise, 4K resolution as well as high dynamic range video. And we'll get into some of the hardware and spec details in the next section, but it's also worth pointing out that this device packs some improved Wi-Fi connectivity along with support for Ethernet connections via a third-party adapter that you can hook up to the micro USB port on the back. So that could be an interesting alternative if you're aiming to use this in a spot where your Wi-Fi connection isn't up to par. And of course, one of the Express 4K Plus's biggest selling points is, well, its price tag. At $39.99, Roku's placing its new streaming device in the spot previously occupied by the Roku Premier. And we'll see how this new device compares to other $40-ish 4K streamers on the market a little later. We should also note here that there's a broadly similar variant coming exclusively to Walmart. That one is known as the Express 4K, no plus sign there, and it retails for $34.99. And as we'll soon see, it very closely matches the Express 4K Plus, but packs in a less advanced remote control to help shave off $5 from the asking price. For now though, let's talk about some specs. Hardware and features. Okay, let's see what we're dealing with here. So here's a look at the specs for the new Roku Express 4K Plus. As you can see, some of the highlights include a Realtek 1315 CPU, 1GB of RAM, and naturally 4K video support. On the HDR side, we have HDR10 and HLG, as well as the more advanced HDR10 Plus standard. We should note here, however, that to take advantage of some of these capabilities, you'll need to hook the Express 4K Plus to a TV that supports these features, including 4K and the various HDR standards like HDR10 Plus. As for the included remote, Roku's packing its familiar voice remote with TV controls, which should hopefully cut down on the need to swap remotes for various functions. But of course, your mileage may vary. And if you're curious how the slightly cheaper Roku Express 4K stacks up, well, you might notice a whole lot of similarities between the two here. Same CPU, RAM, feature set, and more. In fact, the only real difference to be teased out of this comparison is the remote itself, and of course the resulting price tag. On the cheaper Express 4K, you get the simple remote that lacks voice input and TV controls. It's also infrared based, so you'll have to point it at your Express to operate it. And you'll need to position your Express 4K so that it can see the remote. Other than that though, real similar throughout. And in case you're curious how the new streaming device compares to some of the other offerings in Roku's lineup, here are the specs for the standard Express model, which supports up to 1080p video output. And as you can see, the Express 4K Plus boasts a new processor, twice as much RAM, upgraded Wi-Fi, and more. That all being said, the standard Express is notably cheaper and could still be a compelling option if you're not at all worried about 4K output. As for the earlier Roku Premier, well, it's on its way out, and the Express 4K Plus does indeed occupy a very similar space in Roku's lineup as evidenced by these similar capabilities here. But the newer Express 4K Plus does boast a different processor, more robust HDR support, and improved connectivity. Lastly, here's how the Express 4K and 4K Plus compare against Roku's current top-of-the-line streamer, the Roku Ultra. Unsurprisingly, the $99.99 Ultra has the edge in several categories, including onboard RAM, HDR support, and network connectivity. So if you're trying to decide between these devices, it'll be up to you to see if any of these features sway you in one particular direction. For now though, let's take a look at actually using the new Roku Express 4K Plus. Setup and performance. So here's what you get in the box when you pick up a Roku Express 4K Plus. Slide out a plastic tray and you'll find the voice remote with TV controls, a pair of AAA batteries, a micro USB charger, and of course the Roku Express 4K Plus itself. There's also an adhesive strip for mounting the device and some setup documentation. Elsewhere in the box you'll see an insert that houses the included micro USB charging cable and an HDMI cable. And for comparison's sake, here's what the Express 4K Plus looks like side by side with the Roku Premier. All in all, we're dealing with fairly similar dimensions here. However, if you were thinking this new model is just the older Express casing with some upgraded internal parts, you might be surprised to learn the Express 4K Plus is actually larger than its predecessor. It's a very similar design, of course, but we're definitely dealing with a larger device here. And now, without cracking these open to look inside, we're left to speculate, but I imagine that size increase could be due to the change in components and perhaps more demanding heat management requirements given the 4K support, or maybe some combination of both. And for what it's worth, the new device does get a bit warm to the touch when in use. In any case, the Express 4K Plus and the Express 4K for that matter are both similar to the earlier Express, but a bit larger overall. As far as setup goes, it's a straightforward affair. Plug in the device and power it on, and the Express 4K Plus will walk you through setup. You'll be asked to enter an email address, and if this is your first Roku device, just a heads up that registering that email is free, in case you're wondering. Once you're signed in, which you can do on your phone, the setup process will also pitch a number of services to you from various Roku partners, and you can accept or decline as many as you'd like. In our case, the Express 4K Plus immediately detected new software to update, but after a brief restart, it powered up and started automatically downloading the apps that have already been associated with our Roku account. And that can come in handy for existing users, as it means you won't have to start from scratch on a new Roku device, downloading your usual apps one by one. And as soon as those downloads and updates are all taken care of, you should be ready to go. And once it's ready to use, the Express 4K Plus will autoplay a welcome video that walks you through the interface and how to use various features, including voice input and closed captioning. But if you're already familiar with it all, you can skip the video and head straight to streaming. We tried the new Express 4K Plus on 1080p and 4K HDR displays, and it handled all the content we could throw at it. Apps loaded smoothly and consistently, and 4K HDR content like Moana on Disney Plus played without issue. And by the way, you might notice the Express 4K Plus has a sticker on the front that talks about pointing your remote toward the device, and that's more for the standard 4K's IR-based remote. The voice remote included in the 4K Plus can indeed be used without actually pointing it toward the device. However, if you are using that remote for TV controls, you might still need to point it toward your TV for it to work. Just a heads up there when using the voice remote. And speaking of voice, Roku's voice commands may not be as robust as, say, Google's or Amazon systems, but it's capable of some useful tricks. We asked for the time swapped between apps and searched for content using our own voice. We were also able to turn captions on and off via voice, although that experience varied depending on the app we were using at the time. In the YouTube and Disney Plus apps, for example, asking the Express 4K Plus to, quote, turn on captions, unquote, or turn on subtitles worked just fine, but asking the same command in Netflix yielded no results. In other words, voice support can vary depending on the app you're using. On the performance side, we fired up our usual Roku testing gauntlet, which includes a series of streaming apps loaded up in sequence. And we timed how long it took to load each one and compared that cumulative time to other Roku devices to see how the new Express 4K Plus compared. So here's our usual app suite of Netflix, YouTube, Prime Video, Disney+, Hulu, ESPN, Pluto TV, the Roku channel, the Roku Tips and Tricks channel, and then Netflix once more to see if it loads faster the second time around. In this test, the Express 4K Plus pulled an average total time of 70.86 seconds to get through our test. And yes, the Walmart exclusive Express 4K should be capable of very similar times. And we also ran the standard Roku Express through the same test to compare. And while the older Express didn't have the latest OS X update installed, we still think the performance numbers are worth exploring. And with a total score of 103.69, the Express clearly lags behind the Express 4K Plus, so there's definitely a performance advantage to go along with the upgraded feature support. And as for the top-of-the-line Roku Ultra, here's how that top-end device fared with Roku OS X installed. But what about similarly priced 4K streamers from Roku's competitors? Well, we fired up another app suite to compare the Chromecast with Google TV, the TiVo Stream 4K, and the Fire TV Stick 4K, and here's how those all fared. For this test, we changed up the apps a little to include options available on all the competitors, and then we put each one through its paces 3 times and averaged the results. First off, here's how the Chromecast with Google TV, the TiVo Stream 4K, and the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K all performed in this test using the latest available software updates for each platform. But what about the Roku Express 4K Plus? Well, see for yourself. The $40 Express 4K Plus more than holds its own against competitors in its price range, besting the Chromecast with Google TV in overall time, though the different devices clearly have their own strengths and weaknesses on an app-to-app basis. But I think it's safe to say the Roku Express 4K Plus, and by extension the Express 4K, can definitely compete in this price bracket. Wrapping it all up, So there you go, that was our review of the brand new Roku Express 4K Plus. And after all our tests and comparisons, I think it's safe to say the Roku Express 4K Plus is another capable, dependable option in Roku's lineup. You get a lot for your $40 here, including robust HDR support and 4K output. Yes, Dolby Vision would have been nice, but honestly, I think you get a lot for your money here. And as our performance tests suggest, it puts up a very good fight against similarly priced devices from Google, Amazon, and others. Of course, Amazon hasn't updated its 4K Fire TV stick in a long while, so we'll be on the lookout for that in the future. In any case, if you've got a 4K TV and you're maybe looking to upgrade beyond its onboard streaming platform, the Roku Express 4K Plus is a solid deal at $39.99. And if you're fine with using a less capable remote, the Walmart-only Express 4K is even cheaper at $34.99. Both offer strong performance in a compact, easy-to-use package. And if you don't need the Ultra's performance or feature set, the Express 4K Plus is a solid choice. And of course, thank you all for tuning in to our review of the Roku Express 4K Plus. And if you haven't done so already, please do consider clicking that like button down below and maybe even following Cord Cutters News if you haven't done so already. And until next time, my name is Philip Palermo. We'll see you all next week. Take care.